right. We should be good now. I don't know why the mic turned off. I turned it on, I guess maybe 10 minutes ago, and it didn't see any signal, so it just turned off on its own. Anyhow, welcome to my photo editing live stream where I edit your photos here live using DxO Photolab 8. And the idea being is to show you my photo editing workflow using Photolab, all of the tools on your images. I think is a better way to learn a tool than, say, watching a tutorial of somebody else's image, because they cherry pick the images, and it's nothing like what your image might be. And Photolab has been my editor of choice since it came out, since I bought it back when it was Photolab 4. We're now up to version 8.7, and it's still my favorite editor at this point. I do have a lot of other editors, but this is always my go-to first before going anywhere else. And I want you to kind of get an idea of my editing workflow and also the tools that I use and how I use them. And every 2 or 3 pictures, I like to stop and answer any questions you might have in the chat section while I'm editing. So feel free to leave questions in the chat section for me. And when I come around to a good stopping point, I'll try and address those. Um, and then finally, I am an affiliate for DxO now. So if you'd like to download a free trial, I'll have those links down below, along with a 15% discount code. So if you're new to DxO products, then you can get that discount. It doesn't apply to people that already have any of the DxO products, but if you're brand new, uh, that helps me out a lot. And you can also become a member of the channel for just 99 cents to support the live streams that I do here for photo editing and photo chats and shopping and all of that stuff. It's all greatly appreciated. And then, of course, you can always just donate directly, buy me a coffee, or through my PayPal. But in any case, I see Garrett's here, and Larry, and William. Michael, good to see you. John follows. Let's just get right into the editing. And I'll just have to rearrange my screens a bit. Okay, I think we're good. Sorry about that. I don't know why the sound dropped out again. Um, okay, so now I see the sound going. I don't know why. I'm so sorry. We're like 10 minutes into the video and I've been just jibber jabbering about nothing. Okay, so basically I've been talking about the composition and my approach. Uh, so right now I'm in right now I cropped in a little bit to get rid of this foreground because this is causing me a little bit of perspective distraction, right? Because this side is a little longer than the left side. And then when I was cropping in tight, I wanted to center the face here in the image, and that happens to center with the structure itself. And then I'm going to expand this. And now what I'm thinking about are, can I add any depth to the image? Do I need any spacing around the structure for, some negative space to help create that depth? Or, uh, you know, do I crop in tighter and get rid of all of the negative space around the structure? Something like this. Uh, but then we kind of lose the artistic nature or the intent of this photo is to show this bench, right? So I'm debating between the two, between my desire to try to get something that is perspective wise more accurate or more symmetrical versus getting what this structure looks like overall. But I think the intent is we want to see the entire structure. So I'm not going to be able to do this with a 4:3 crop. So I'm going to change this to possibly 5:4. Let's see if that helps. And again, I'm going to try and center right here. And I'm just using this block here to center it. Even a 5:4 doesn't quite let me get there. 1:1 is going to be too tight, I think. Yeah, I can't quite do that. So the question is, do I really need the top? Let's go back to a 5:4. Composition is sometimes the hardest thing, right? To get right. But what I was saying when the audio was off is there's three things I look at basically when I open the image. It's composition, lighting, and white balance. And these are things you should try to get right in camera before you start editing. And then when you go to editing, you just do some tweaks to it and you should be good. But in this case, we have a lot of distortions here that I'm not going to be able to correct for, and I can't really embrace the distortions either because it is a very tight crop to begin with. But I'm going to try this. Okay, I think that works. Now I want to try to bring out the detail here in the structure and maybe possibly something in the sky. Uh, I definitely want to make the sky darker. So I'm going to use my linear gradient. What does a control line is what? Excuse me, control line. And just bring that in. I'm going to tighten up the luminosity masking here. Just maybe 5 points. Let's try 10. And then let's do clear view. I don't think, yeah, there's nothing in the sky. But I like the effect it's having on the structure. So I'm going to keep the clear view. And then I'm going to add some micro contrast. And then I'm going to bring the highlights in just a tiny bit. Okay, so now the structure looks a little brighter than the sky, which is kind of what I was going for. And then I want to bring out the luminance here on the subject. I'm just going to use control points for that. Let me turn off the masking here. I think that will do. Let's just push the midtones first, and then a tiny bit in the shadows. Okay, good. I like that. And all right, we're good there. Now I'm going to see if I can add some depth to the image, either through adjusting the lighting in different areas, or well, let me try the lighting on the foreground here. I think I'd like to make this a little darker. And just drag the dropper down here, and we'll just do a linear pull on the exposure. Maybe not that much, and spread it out a bit. Let me just do a quick comparison. Okay, that looks good. All right, so I'm debating if I should go monochrome because there's a hint of green in here, which would complement this blue jacket, but not enough of it. But I kind of like the color better. So I'm going to stick with color. And then let me go back to, I want to sort of, let me see what, if I can bring out a little more detail in here. We'll push the highlights. Oops, not that much. Give the highlights a bit of a push. Because this structure is metallic, so I'm definitely want to accentuate that a bit. And there seems to be some colors in here. So maybe I will de-emphasize that, desaturate the color. And then let's try the global contrast here. I'll pull the highlights back. All right, I think I got the background, the subject, or the structure and the subject the way I want it. So I don't know if I can add any more drama to the scene. Let me try another control point down here and see if I can just pull the lighting back and just create sort of a shadowy kind of area down here. I need to keep this inside or outside of the inside. And then let's go back to this control point. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let me go back to that control point. Okay. I'm going to just add a little more shadow. Okay, almost there. This is not working out the way I expected. Okay, just add a little bit more light on this side and down here. Okay, I'm going to call it there. So let's do a quick export, and I'm going to do disable resizing, export to the same folder. Okay. All right. It's almost there. I'm watching the arrow down here. Okay, so let's reset this and do a side by side and compare with the output. Uh, so I think that looks pretty good. So I think this basically I just added contrast, right? And then I shifted the light a little bit to make it feel like it's coming a little bit in from the right side and then creating some shadows here on the left side. But William here was a little bit too dark here in the middle, so brightening that, and then adding some texture and contrast into the structure, and then making the sky appear darker than this bench itself. So I think that looks pretty good. Um, so we can just kind of do a slider thing. That's the original, and there's the edit. All right. So what I don't know if you guys heard this when the sound was off, but every 2 or 3 images, I'm going to stop and answer questions in the chat section, uh, about the editing or any of the tools. So if you have any questions about Photolab, uh, you can leave them in the chat section, and when I come to a stopping point, I'll try and answer them in between the edits here. Okay, here's one from David Rye, and this is a JPEG image, so it's already been processed either, in camera or, uh, in photo editing. So basically, what my approach here is going to be looking at the composition and making very minor adjustments to the exposure. Because with the JPEG file, I don't have the same latitude with exposure and colors and white balance as I would a raw image. But fortunately, this is pretty well exposed to begin with, so any tweaks I make would be minor. And when I'm doing editing cars, the wheels, the interior, and the lights. These are the things I kind of look at. In this image here, we don't really have much of any of that. The wheels are, these are kind of the carbon. I'm not big on this style where people have black rims. Personally, I like silver rims. But, so the wheels, I can add a little bit of texture here. There is one tail light here I can maybe try to bring out, but the interior is completely hidden. Usually, when I take a picture of a car, I like to see the steering wheel or the dashboard in the shot, uh, especially when we're coming from behind or in doing a three-quarter shot. So I would have preferred to take this shot on the driver's side rather than the passenger side in this case. This is the United States, so the driver's side is on the left. However, the intent here is to show the flag draped over the car. And so I need to emphasize that in the photo to make this uh, to send the message I think the photographer intended. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to apply again the same basic preset. I did notice there's an optical thing I can throw in here. DxO does apply optical corrections even to JPEGs, but we'll see. It usually has very, very little impact at this point because the JPEG's already been baked. But we'll do that. Now we'll apply the basic preset, and as you can see, it didn't do anything. But let's just click perspective correction and see. Yeah, that's not good. I like what it did for the building, but then the car looks kind of wonky. So we're not going to do that. We're going to just have to rely on just straightening the horizon. And I'm just using this barn as a guide. The line that I want to be vertical is usually right in the middle of the image here. So maybe right here. If this line can be vertical, that would be good. Let me try using these line tools here. I'm going to zoom in and just fine tune that. And then the other one is here. Maybe we'll use this door. Okay, let's hit enter and see what happens. All right, not bad. Not great. Let me undo the horizon correction because I'm using the perspective tool. It's going to kind of fix the horizon anyway. All right, that looks pretty good. Let me get an idea of what we cropped out. Not much, but we are a little bit tight on top of this flag. So what I might do, let me think about the composition here. Because the question is, do I really need this part of the car? And this is very distracting, this tent. But it's right above the fender of the car here. So I don't think a vertical is going to help. But I'd like to get, let me try 5x4. And think about the depth in the photos. So we have a very strong foreground here with the flag, then this barn, and then back here the rest of the street. This doesn't work too well. Let's try. Let's go up here. See if I can get that wheel in. I'm just using rule of thirds here to put the flag. That's kind of it. Come a little bit over and come up. All right, so I think I'll go with this composition. All right, now with respect to lighting or the car, because the image is not about the car, but I'm just gonna touch it up a bit. Let's see if I can accentuate these wheels. And I don't like carbon wheels. I like silver, but let's see if we can just make them sparkle a bit. And then we'll do the same thing with the lights. It's a little bit like birds. You know, you do eyes, beak, and talons. On cars, you do basically, lights and interior and wheels, right? Uh, Let's create a new control point for the lights and just accentuate those a bit if I can. I'll do the same thing for the tailpipes. All right. Now let's work on the highlights. Uh, yes, I think these highlights are pretty much gone. Let's see if I can recover a little bit like that, a little bit there. Add some clear view. And let's bring out the tones of the car best we can. Like that. And some micro contrast. All right, let me see. Yeah, that looks good. All right, I'm going to tone down the rest of the scene here because this is all unnecessary. Just tone it down a bit. Reduce the contrast. Okay. Let's get those points away from the car. And then let's do a little bit with the sky. So make a new control line up here. And we're going to tighten up both the chroma and the luma. Just 5 points. And clear view and highlights. Okay. This canopy, let me bring this canopy down a bit. All right. I'm gonna go to some global adjustments. Let me just push the shadows a tiny bit there. Wonder if I can fix some of these grass. Okay. So a little bit up here. Just use something up there. Okay. We're gonna call it there. And I really don't need to export this because it's already a JPEG. I'm not gonna see any difference. Let's just do a quick comparison side by side. And so yeah, just a little tighter crop 5:4 to bring the center or this corner of the image more to the front, because that seems to be the subject here. And then the perspective corrections, right? So all I had to do really was just straighten the lines on the barn door here and then the side over here. And then tone down this side. This side was just a little bit too bright and didn't have any depth to it. And then also, if you look closely, you can see I tried to make the car look a little more shiny and also have some uh, a dimension or depth, or so you can see the curves and lines of the car itself. So hopefully that stands out more, especially here on the wheels, just increasing the contrast. And that's about all I could do. So if we just do sort of a slider thing, that's the before image, and that's the after. Just straightening the lines alone, I think, makes a big improvement. And then just adding some contrast. It'd been nicer to have the raw image, but I wouldn't be able to do much more than this anyway. Okay, let's do one more. And okay, um, I like this one tree right here, being surrounded by all these rocks. I don't think I need the top of this. I feel like if I include the top, now it becomes more about the rocks, but I really like just what's going on right in here. So I'm going to crop in pretty tight here. I'm going to apply my basic preset, which again is just optical corrections and noise reduction with a couple of minor tweaks. And let's just look at a tighter crop. Right here in this greenish section, I like what's going on here. Give it a little breathing room and go with that. Yeah, I like that a lot better. So now all I have to do is just kind of add some depth to this with lighting. So I'm going to pull the shadows back a bit. Uh, and you may have noticed I always go for local adjustments first because when I look at the composition, the lighting, and the white balance, uh, everything looks good from the start. Uh, but composition-wise, all I did on this image was just crop in. And when the exposure and the white balance is pretty much there already, I don't have to do any major global adjustments. I can go right to adjusting it on a local, area by area type edit. So I'm definitely seeing light coming up here, and I try to follow where the light is naturally already. So I'm going to hit some light on these trees up here and then down here, but I'm going to definitely push the shadows down in the lower parts of this or inner parts of this rock. I think that'll work. And I'm going to start with the blacks. Okay. And let's add a little micro contrast in there. Uh, make this a little smaller. Whoops. We'll make this a little smaller. Let's come in here. And then let's try a linear pull. I'm not quite getting the effect that I want. That's not bad. And then I'm going to pull it off a tiny bit. That'll also help with the sort of perception that this is a shadowy area. And I never like to move the white balance more than 500 Kelvin. So I think in this case, I'll do about 200. That should be good enough. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Oops, let me compare with geometry. Okay, I think I can bring in, I'm going to go back to the overall image. I'm going to pull the exposure down even more. Sometimes this helps me see where the light is. Maybe just a quarter stop there. Okay. And then white balance wise, I'm just going to give it a little more warmth on a global basis. Let's just go up about 300. All right, now I'm going to start accentuating the green areas here. So let me tighten up the chroma just a bit by 5. Make this a little smaller. And I'm going to start with highlights. And this is the other thing I do is when I'm trying to brighten something, I always use the selective tone and I start at the brightest if I'm trying to brighten something, or at the darkest if I'm trying to make something darker. And then I'll just work my way down this scale like that. Okay, that looks good. I think it helps makes the adjustments look more natural, but also have a little more uh, dynamic range to it. Okay, so I'm going to add actually a little bit extra warmth, just maybe another 200 Kelvin there. Put on this. Yeah, this needs to be much brighter. So I'm just going to do a linear push, and let's see if we can get in here. I might have to use a tiny, tiny brush to get this, because I like the tree trunk. Let me try tiny brush, maybe a selective brush. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna push. Yeah, that looks good. Whoops. I'm gonna have to adjust this a tiny bit. I'll make this a little bit warmer. I'm gonna hit the Alt key, and that turns the brush into an eraser. And I'll just make it a little smaller by pushing the Control key and rotating the mouse. And I'm going to just pull off some of the bleed that I got in here. Okay. And then we'll add it back in with a smaller brush. And a little bit of warmth. Okay, good. Uh, let's do a little bit in here too. So let me adjust this brush. I'm at a very low flow, so I can kind of do this a little bit at a time. I need a little bit more in here. Okay. And let's just erase a little bit off the side. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Uh, maybe just a little bit more off here. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna vignette a little bit on the left side, but I'll do that with a control point. I want these rocks to be just a little darker overall. So just do a linear pull and then pull the blacks just like that. Let's push the highlights to keep the light in there. All right, good. Let me see. Bring a little more light down in here and here and here. Right there. Oh, that's a bit much. I think it's this one is a little bit too dark. And then I'm going to get rid of this. Not get rid of it, but just minimize it a bit by pulling some of the shadows like that. Maybe right. I think we're almost there. Let me just accentuate the shadows down in here a bit. And then we'll add a little bit of light on this bush. Let's go back to the blacks. Let me pull that in a bit more up there, a little bit in there, and down in there, and there, a little bit more there. All right, it's getting a little patchy, so I'm going to stop. Maybe just pull the highlights just a tiny bit on the global side. Pull the blacks and shadows in a bit more, and then push the midtones. Ah, no, let's not do that. This part is a little bit hot, so I'm just gonna quickly pull the highlights here. This needs to come in. All right, now I'm gonna push the reds a little bit in the color wheel. At least I think this is kind of a red. Let's see. It's more of an orange. So ooh, that's a bit too much. How about let's just tighten it up a bit. Let's try that. It's a little better. And then let's do the greens and yellows. Okay, let's tighten that up a bit. That, add a little bit of luminance. And let's just shift it. Let's see. Let's shift it a little bit warmer. Okay, and then I think globally, I think I'll just do some micro contrast here. Just a little bit of a push in the midtones and shadows. And I'm gonna make this part darker. Let me see. So what if I put a drop there? And then this a little bit brighter and a little more saturation. The slight shift. All right, I'm gonna call it there. Uh, let's export this. We'll do a side by side, no corrections. And once that's done exporting, we'll. Okay. All right, so here's the original on the right. So again, I like this part in the center the best, these couple trees and bushes. So I just sort of balanced the image and centered and made that the subject. Uh, you know, these rocks here on top could be a separate image, I think. But to me, the most interesting part was right here in the middle. And it was just about, adjusting the lighting so that it's still natural, but shows gives the image a little more depth, uh, rather than being so flat. So there's the original image, and then here's the edited image. I think that looks a lot better, say versus the original. Okay, so let me take a pause here. That's three images. I'm gonna just look at the chat section, see what we have here. See, Paul is here. David Crooks. Hey, David, good to see you. And Saucy Angel. Let's see. And let me go up to the top. Yeah, sorry about the sound in the beginning. That was bad. I really need to pay attention. Uh, and then Paul says was trying to get a handheld high-res shot of the strawberry moon, but it kept failing the process. Tried multiple times, but no luck. Any idea why? I think because there's too much negative space. Uh, unless you can really fill the frame with the moon itself, the algorithm that puts the high res shots together just doesn't have enough control points to match up. So usually it's just too much negative space is the problem. So I don't really have any other tips other than to use a longer lens or try maybe try, I'm just guessing, okay? I haven't done this myself, but try changing the aspect ratio to square. I know this only affects the JPEG, but it may, if it's an option in high-res shot mode, if you can adjust the aspect ratio to square, that'll crop in a little bit for you, right? And and you just need a longer lens. I think ultimately that's the only solution. Okay, and man, those localized edit circles are a neat feature. Yeah, I love those. I love those, and that's why it's just works for me that the way those control points work and stuff. It just works with how my brain is wired. So I really like those. It's so much easier than in Lightroom. I really struggle in Lightroom because you have to do add, subtract, plus, it's a little bit more clumsy in Lightroom, doing like elliptical and gradients and things like that. Whereas in Photolab, it feels very smooth, right? Uh, and that was the reason I took that shot, the tree. Oh, okay, Larry, cool. So you were going for this tree. depending on the lens you were using, I guess, what did you have, a 12 to 60 and oh, you're a 20. No, you could have probably went to about 25 or 30 and just cropped in right there. But anyhow, cool. So we were looking at the same thing. And Shri says, oh, that's for Paul. How you doing, Shri? And David's saying it's because the moon doesn't stand still. Uh, well, when you use a really long lens and you can fill the frame, you can do handheld high-res shot of the moon. I've done it before. I wasn't crazy about the results, but it did process. And so I think it's more along the lines of not because of the motion of the moon, but because it's just too small in the frame, most likely. So I think he's saying the camera wouldn't process it, so blurry or not with a moving moon, it would still process the photo. No. No. Like I said again, it has to do with it's looking in the frame for control points to match, to line up the pixels. And if there's too much negative space, meaning you're not cropped in enough, it's going to struggle. And the Moon handheld high-res works on my G9 too. Never did one with the OM1. Okay. So maybe it's using a different algorithm where it eliminates all the negative space. But I'm just guessing. Okay, but this is based on uh, panorama software that I use that stitches images together. It looks for control points that match. And high-res shot mode is basically a panorama. It's only a few pixels in every direction, but it tries to find control points to line up the image. And I think that's where it's struggling, just like any panorama software would. And it's supposed to compensate for movement. Yes, it does to some degree. Depends on how, what it thinks it can ignore. Again, it's all in the algorithm. It can ignore some motion, and sometimes it cannot ignore the motion and won't be able to stitch. So a good example is like I did a panorama of, uh, uh, we'll call it a cityscape, and there was a highway running in two directions in the scene. And I did a high-res shot mode, and all the cars on the highway, I got, double images, right? Triple, quadruple images, however many. But I got multiple images of individual cars, whereas the building and the landscape and the cityscape were high res, perfectly fine. So it does account for motion or can ignore some motion. And like in a waterfall scene, because the water is very fluid, it makes it look like a long exposure. But like with a car, a highway, you sometimes you get, depending how fast the cars are moving, you can get those multiple images and artifacts with things that are in motion, but it'll still be able to stitch the image together. But it all has to do with the algorithm and how it looks at motion. Um, every image is different. And Shri says, I also tried it from Milky Way, but not much success with some of the videos out there suggest to use hand-on and high-res shots since the sensor can make tiny adjustments and stitch the image back. Yeah, I haven't tried it much myself. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've done it for like Milky Way because the stars are so faint. It's basically negative space to the algorithm, and it's not able to find or match control points with uh, the Milky Way because it's just too faint. So I would imagine it's going to fail most of the time. So yeah, I wouldn't use it for Milky Way. Yeah, if I try it and it works, that would be great, but I seriously doubt it because it just the stars are too faint. The only way to capture Milky Way are are single exposures and then stacking them later. So maybe capture 20, 30 images 15 to 30 seconds each, depending on your angle of view, and then stacking them in Photoshop or something. And the OM 1.7 software was supposed to enhance the handheld high-res shot mode. I haven't compared before and after, but I think the enhancements were in motion artifacts. Like doing a waterfall, you might get a little bit less artifacts. And Walter says, all these local adjustment points, wouldn't it be easier if you just had a brush you can use to paint them in the pressure with pressure to control the intensity? No, because the control points use luminosity and chromacity, right? Color and light to select the mask. And I prefer that much over just using pressure and intensifying or not using a pencil, right? So I would need to use a pencil. It's very hard to control a brush with a mouse other than some very minor things. So I would need a pencil or tablet of some type to control the pressure. But for example, if we look at this tree here, and I wanted to brighten the greens, but not the rock behind it, this would be a lot harder to do with a brush, right? And adjusting the intensity via pressure, because I would have to go around this way and around this way, then down here, then jump over and do this one. Whereas, if I use a control point that looks at the color, I can say, okay, let's tighten up the chroma color so it only looks at the green, and I can just make one control point to adjust this, right? So if I look at this, if I used a brush, like you were saying, I would have to kind of go around, all the rocks this way individually. It would be a little harder for me versus I can use a control point, stick it there, and then tighten up the chroma mask so it only selects the greens and not the rock, like that. And I can just quickly move around the tree like that, right? Even the green in that rock there, I can tighten up the chroma even more. So using a brush that's pressure sensitive, like if I just wanted to affect the greens on the rocks, that would be hard to do with a brush. And I'd have to do it all over, whereas I can just kind of just spot, here and there very quickly. See, so like in a few seconds, I can do all of this, whereas with a brush with a pressure, I'd have to have a little finesse. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you'd have to have some finesse and skill to do that. And I don't have to do that with control points. At least that's the workflow I'm thinking of, right? I'm not sure exactly if we're thinking of doing the same thing to the image, but that's how I would approach. That's why I like control points that have chroma and luma masking over, say, a pressure sensitive pen. Because just imagine trying to do all these bushes, all these trees with a pen and pressure sensitivity, and then going back and erasing. I would go nuts. My brain's just not wired that way. But good question. Good question. And then David, nice job on the rocks. Oh, thank you, Tim. And have you worked with Luminar Neo? What are the main differences with DxO? I have worked with it. I think the workflow of Luminar Neo, the approach initially is very different. With Photolab, I go right into the local editing. So after I look at composition, lighting, white balance, right? I go right to local editing 9 times out of 10. And with Luminar, it's a little bit different. You open up an image, and then of course you don't necessarily look directly to composition, lighting, and white balance. the workflow is you start to think about presets right away because they have a panel over there where you can approach different looks. So they have landscape, they have portraiture, they have a bunch of other presets on the side. And I think the intent of Luminar Neo is to start with a preset and then to go into the editing and make adjustments. But let's say you're not a preset guy or girl, right? You just want to edit the image. You can skip the preset panel and go right into editing. And then you do this. Then I would do the same approach. But the way Luminar Neo masks is it just the masking tools and everything are just not intuitive to me. I have to watch tutorials on Luminar Neo a couple of times to get a feel for how it's masking things and the different masking tools and where they are. I feel like every tool has its own masking tool, right? Uh, so in some ways, it's a little more powerful for editing, but in other ways, it just is very confusing to me. So it's a workflow that I can't wrap my brain around is the problem. And then some other things are very, very good. Like I really like the AI selection tools for doing portraits, softening skin, removing shine, brightening teeth and eyes. It has a lot of really cool tools that you can do very quickly and edit hundreds, if not thousands, of photos. Like I did an event where I took about 500 or 600 shots, and I had to go into every image in Photolab and edit them individually. Whereas in Luminar, it has some AI tools for doing portraits. And you can just click soften skin, and it doesn't matter where the subject is in frame, it'll find the subject and soften the skin, whether they're standing on the left side or the right side. So I can apply a lot of edits very quickly. And usually they're pretty good. And I just have to go back and do some adjustments with the crop or straighten the horizon, things like that. So I did find Luminar Neo does have a very good workflow for certain things that if I really learned it well, I could probably uh, get some great results even faster than I could with Photolab 8 because of the AI tools that it has built in. And I'm not talking about just the one, it has a lot of different AI tools. So I really like Luminar Neo's tools. I just can't get my brain around them quite quite yet. I have to spend some time, like I have with Photolab. I've been doing Photolab for 4 years now, so I can pretty much get through things very quickly. Now, in terms of the final output, the denoising, the sharpening, the AI removal tools, no, it has very good AI removal tools. But uh, talking about the final output, like you're done editing and you want to export it, reduce noise, sharpen the image, distortion corrections, things like that. It's nowhere near as good as Photolab. So uh, that's why I've always stuck with Photolab is because I know the final image that I get is going to be the best that I can get from my image, right? Whereas if I use Luminar Neo, if the images are not that noisy and already pretty sharp and if it's a decent image to start with, you'll get great results from Luminar. If you have a lot of images to edit and they're all fairly good to start with, you can very quickly edit a lot of images. Photolab 8 doesn't have that AI advantage. You have to work with each image individually. You can apply global presets and stuff like that, but it's not as easy, right? So for me, I typically work on images one at a time, and I prefer the final output, the sharpening, the noise reduction, and the workflow of editing a single image much more over the workflow of editing single images in Luminar because I rarely have to do hundreds of images at a time, except when I do events. Uh, and even then, I can very quickly get through things Photolab now because I have a pretty fast workflow overall. I work very slowly here in the stream because I'm trying to go through a thought process and what's the best way to explain that and show the tools, etc. But when I'm editing my images that I take from a job or from a photo walk, I'm pretty fast. I can usually offload the images, cherry pick, 5 or 6. Usually I cherry pick about 6 images out of 100, and then I'm done, and the rest I delete eventually. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Um, so I'm sorry, Michael, that was your question. So the main difference is really in the workflow. It's very, very different. Particularly the masking tools and AI tools are very powerful in Luminar, but I can't wrap my brain around them. Uh, and then Jan is asking about borrowing an X-ray color monkey photo. What do you use for your monitor photo printer? Okay, so I also use whatchamacallit. I don't normally do this. I don't normally calibrate or create DCP profiles for individual cameras. I have them, I have made them, but rarely do I actually use them. So this is where you take a picture of this, load it into your software, and calibrate the colors of individual camera and lens combinations, and even in different lighting situations. That's a lot of work. If I was doing product photography or art reproduction, then this is critical to the workflow when you're doing reproduction. But I'm doing more creative artsy fartsy stuff. So this is not that important. Now, when it comes to calibrating your monitor and printer and things like that, that's a whole different workflow. You don't use this. What you do is you use uh, a thing that you put on your screen. Let me see. I use one called the Spider. I just did this a couple of weeks ago on my monitors. This one is, yeah, Data Color Pro, which I think bought out X-Rite. And using this to create a color profile on your monitor so that you know your monitors are displaying accurate colors. And if you have multiple monitors, you can kind of sync those so that the images have accurate colors from each monitor. And I calibrate, I have 3 monitors, so I calibrate them so that the colors somewhat look the same on each screen. They're never going to be exactly the same because each monitor has a different uh, capability and brightness and all of that. So, but they're probably 90% the same, close enough. But for editing, I use one monitor and I make sure that's calibrated properly, and it also tells me uh, how accurate it is. If it's like 100% Adobe RGB, which mine is, but it's also like 97% DCI-P3, which is more of a video color space, but it's pretty much like uh, it's a little bigger, I think, than Adobe RGB. It doesn't matter. You just want the most accurate colors you can with the monitors that you have. It's not critical, but it does help, right? You can also adjust the brightness. Typically, you want to adjust between 80 and 120 nits, depending on how you're going to print. But you don't want your monitor to be much brighter than your print, right? Because that's one of the most common problems is people say, gosh, it's nice and bright on my monitor. Why did it print so dark? Well, it's because you have your monitor set too bright, basically. And so I typically operate at about 120 nits, and know that that's going to be a little brighter than what my prints are going to look like. And a lot of times I'll do a test print before I do a serious print that I'm going to frame. I'll do a little test print on a 4x5 or 4x6 card first, see how it looks, and then I'll do the 8x10 or whatever if I need to, if I'm going to frame it. Uh, so calibrating your monitor for printing, you're mainly focused on the brightness of the monitor, right? And you set that to whatever works for you. Like I said, most people set it between 80 and 120 nits, and that will be that will be adjusted. You can do that using that little device I just showed, right? To help calibrate the color and the brightness. Now, the printer calibration, don't overthink this. Okay, they have tools that where you print something out of your printer, you scan the print that it made with all the different colors, and then it creates an ICC profile for your printer based on the paper uh, that you might be using and the inks that you have. Because let's say you're using generic ink, then yeah, it's you may not get the colors that you see on your monitor out of your printer. But if you're using original OEM manufacturer ink in your color printer and original OEM paper, so for example, I have an Epson printer, I'm going to use Epson ink, and I'm going to use Epson paper. Epson has already calibrated and created an ICC profile for accurate colors in reproduction. They've already done all the work. All you have to do is send, you know, from your software when you print a clean image to your printer, right? And say just let the printer manage the color profile. So when you send an image from your software to your printer, don't apply any profiles to it. Just say let the printer manage the color profile. Then in the printer, make sure you have the correct paper selected uh, for that you put in the printer. And then, you want to set it to photo, whatever other settings for quality they have in there, set it to the highest. You're done. You don't have to worry about calibrating the printer to your monitor. You will go freaking nuts if you try to do that. And these tools to actually calibrate things properly cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. It's not something the casual enthusiast can really do effectively. So you have to just don't overthink it. If you have a Canon, photo printer, Canon ink, Canon paper. The Canon paper is usually in a drop-down list. So you select the paper, you use a drop-down list, and it'll say Canon matte, or Canon glossy, or whatever. And you can buy the exact Canon paper that matches what's in the drop-down box. And you don't have to worry about color and density of the ink and how it prints all of it. Because if you try to do it yourself, if you download, for example, or if you buy third-party paper, I forget the name of the company, but there's third-party paper you can buy that people like. And they also have ICC profiles that you can download and use when you send it from your photo editing software. So in that scenario, you say don't let the printer manage the color profile. You let the software handle the color profile. So uh, I don't calibrate my printer at all, and I get great prints from them because I always use the paper that's supposed to go with that printer and OEM ink. The monitor I calibrate, when I remember to. I don't. It's not critical uh, to my editing, but if I was doing art reproduction, product photography, then I would be a lot more diligent about color because we're doing a reproduction. We're not doing something creative, right? So I'm sorry for the long thing on that. This is a photo editing stream, but I do want to answer questions along the way. Uh, One of its big strengths is masking. Yes, I think the Luminar Neo is what you're talking about, and it's a tool you really have to learn to use it, right? And thanks, Rob, for discussing brushing versus control points. Capture One can do dynamic luminosity mask, but not dynamic color masks on layers. Okay, they'll get there. They'll probably add it. Uh, how do you minimize or eliminate the transition line at the edge of the hue mask? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So a hue mask, this is the hue mask here, right? So I'm going to pick hue meaning color, right? So here are some masking options. The only thing I would do is maybe tighten it up a little bit or expand it. Yeah, I like if I want to stretch this into the reds, or if I want to tighten it up even more, I would use the control points in here to tighten up the masking. I I rarely use this tool because it's something that I think you have to buy film pack to have this as an option. So I try not to use it in my editing. But I think, yeah, that's the only thing I know of. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Um, and one thing I would say is that I now use it in conjunction with DxO, as that has the best noise reduction technology. Oh, so you use Luminar and DxO like Pure Raw or something. That's a very common workflow. FYI, Data Color does not own X-Ray. Google says Verata owns X-Ray. Okay. Somehow when I was buying, I mean, uh, X-Ray color checker, for example, right? This is the one, Calibrate. Interesting. I could have sworn this was by Data Color. It doesn't matter. But I could have sworn Data Color uh, ever owns X-Ray. No, it's not. They're separate. X-Ray was acquired and later became whatever. Okay. All right. I don't know why I thought when I was buying the color cards, it said it's the X-Rite uh, Color Monkey. I could have sworn they bought those. Um, Color Checker. I don't know why I'm spending time on this. It really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Uh, I use pre-made ICC print profiles, but I let the software control the colors versus the printer. Okay, because I assume you're using. Well, you have an Epson printer, if I recall, or is it a Canon? I don't know. Why would you use a pre-made ICC print profile? Even if they were provided by the printer, the manufacturer, then I understand. Um, because I have downloaded printer profiles that I use, and then yeah, I do let the software manage the profile for specific types of paper that I use on my Canon, this Canon printer behind me. So it's, but yeah, definitely, yeah, that makes sense. And thanks for the reply. I learned something new every time. Okay, I don't have a color printer, paper, and color toners. I think will be an uphill battle for me, but my photo friend wants to try. Oh, okay. Good luck. All right, let's go back to editing. So I'm going to do these best I can. So this one is from Garrett. Apply preset. I'm sorry for those of you that are here just for the editing. I'm sorry about that sort of. That was a long session there for answering questions, but there were some good questions there. So let's apply basic preset. And all right, so this is heavily backlit. Uh, I like the fence line over here. So I'm thinking about composition. White balance seems fine. It's just a very strong backlight over here. That's going to be hard to deal with. So I think I'm going to just concentrate on this left corner and ignore the right corner. Even though there's some information here, this door is open. I'm just going to ignore this right corner. So let me do a perspective correction first. Maybe a minor horizon. No, I think we're okay. And I'm just going to crop out that left side and just work with this. I'm sorry, crop out the right side and just work with the left side, this fence line. I'm going to expand this to a 4 by 3. And that doesn't quite work. It's just a little bit out of balance. It's too heavy here on the right. And this opening is a little too close. So can I come out a little more? All right, let's go with this. And then let me do a control line and we'll just start from the bottom. Well, no, let's start from the top. Let's go to the top and just gradually brighten up just the shadow areas. So I'm going to tighten up the luminosity mask. And let's just start with the highlights, then the midtones, shadows. Mm. Okay, let's bring this down. Let's do a little bit of a linear push. Why is that? Yeah, good there. Okay, and let's pull the highlights up here. And you have to be careful with the highlights because you can get some haloing effect if you're a little bit too aggressive with that. Yeah, I think that's good. Let me tighten up the luma again. Just 5 points. Let's go 10. Okay. That's that doesn't look natural. What happened here? I think it's this one. Tighten up the chroma a bit. Okay. 'Cause this tree was starting to look a little mushy. All right. Let me add some clear view and some micro contrast. And then I'm gonna get a control point and just go in here a bit and brighten that door. Again, add some contrast. That looks good. And then the windows, always like to make those just a little shinier with clear view, contrast here and here. And let's illuminate that sign just a bit or emphasize it. So let's try micro contrast and a little bit of a push on the shadows and give it a little bit of color. So push the vibrancy. Let's try saturation. It's not much there. We'll leave it there. Okay. Um, and then I'm just going to do a couple other little things here and here. Just push the highlights and contrast on these. Not quite that much. And then I'm going to go to the color. Let's get these daisies to stand out a bit more. So I'm going to saturate that, bring up the luminosity a tiny bit. Let me see. Yeah, we need more color. Then I'm going to take the greens, just shift them more green, just to separate them from the daisies a tiny bit. Let's see. Okay. And let's pull the luminosity down a bit. Go back to the yellows. Shift them just a tiny bit to the reds. Okay. Okay, I think I'm done. So let's export that. And we'll do a comparison. It's almost ready. So reset. All right, so that's my edit here on the left. And I don't know, I just didn't like the really strong highlights over here on the right side. And this yeah, this part just didn't interest me that much in this tree. So I just cut all that out and went with the fence line here and the doorway. I wanted to bring that out. And that's it. So if we do more of a split view, um, I think this is a little more balanced image and a little less hard on the eyes because of the contrast between the background and the foreground. This is a little bit easier to look at. I think I would add a little more contrast up here, but that's pretty much it. Okay, and then let's see, we have one here from Michael. It's like a destruction scene here. So let's go ahead and apply basic preset. And think about the composition. Again, this is very heavily backlit, but it's interesting because you have this like cathedral thing over here, and then you have this office building being torn down. Some interesting shadows here. We might be able to bring, the dust here would be interesting with some clear view. And this guy here actually gives some good scale to the image. Been nice if they were standing over here, but in any case, probably be dangerous to stand over there. So I'm going to try and bring out the dust around this image. And balance-wise, this image is pretty well balanced. I don't think we need the left side or right side here much, but I don't know if I can really do much cropping. That feels a little better. It's still very, very heavy over here, but we'll try and offset that with the smoke or dust, I should say. So I'm just going to do a little local adjustment here and see just a test spot. Like I'm going to test this spot here to see if I can make the smoke and the haze more visible. Yeah, kind of. Okay. I like that. All right. So let's go with that. Really strong in here and here. I'll push the micro contrast. Move this around a bit. Okay. Full the blacks. Let's do a new control point for this, whatever this crane is. Brighten that, give it some contrast and clear view. Just a little brighter and a little more saturation. So we'll use vibrancy. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. All right, not bad. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going for a very dramatic type edit here because it is a dramatic scene. So I'm just trying to, oops, wrong button. This is the one I want. I meant to grab this and stretch it. Let's tighten up the luma, just 5 points. Maybe cool it off a tiny bit or warm it. No, let's pull back a couple hundred. And then I'm gonna I'm gonna dim the sky a bit. Let me make a tighter chroma mask. Let's cool it off a tiny bit. give it a little more color. So what's throwing this off? It's the magenta. Can make it a little more teal. And then let me go back to the yellows here. And this guy. Make this a little warmer. A little less green. Okay. And let's work on the cathedral separately. I'm going to push this just a couple hundred Kelvin here. More contrast and push the highlights. How big is this thing? Let me make that smaller. All right, and then one more for this worker over here. Just maybe a linear push. Make them stand out a bit. Let me go back to the sky. What if I come down? No, I think we were good where we were. All right. Okay, so it's getting a little bit too gritty. So I might just do just a global pull on the micro contrast. I feel like this thing here, this crane thing. What am I doing wrong on this? I just need a couple of more spots. Ah, there we go. That feels better. Okay, it's so bright over here. This was just feeling a bit too dark. So I'm going to move this over a bit. There we go. Let's move that up. Okay. All right, then a couple of more points here and there, just on the highlights. Maybe do that with micro contrast, give it a little warmth. Let's tighten up the luma. It's down there. Yeah, just a little more. Just a little bit of light down in here and here. Let's see. Yeah, not that one. All right, I think that's it. So let me export that. And we'll do a side by side. Once that exports. So this reset. Okay, so yeah, basically I just composition wise, I just cropped this right part out because I wanted everything to be here as tight as possible. I would have cropped this guy out too and just had these two pieces in there. But I kind of like the scale that this person provides to the image, so that's why I left it there. But an even tighter crop would have worked for me if this person wasn't here. So if we just sort of that's the before. So it's a very dusty, kind of flat image, but it's a very destructive scene. So that's kind of why creatively I decided to go with a very dramatic shadows and hard contrast type scene. But to balance the picture even more, I would have cropped this left side out because if you just give you an idea of what that would look like, I would have liked to have just cropped right in here, something like that. Just a little bit tighter. That this balance is better for me than having the whole thing here. Now it's a little bit too heavy on the right, but like I said, this nice little accent of this person here, I think, helps the scene overall and helps tell the story. Okay, let's see. Oh, so yeah, John is saying with a square crop, eliminate. So that's kind of the direction I was going in, right? Uh, with this other crop, we're thinking along the same lines, right? Something like that, and getting rid of that building. I don't know if a square crop would fit though, but we can try. Yeah, that works. That looks really good. A nice square crop. I was working too hard to keep that little worker in the photo. But yep, that works. I like this better actually, were it not for the one little worker that I think is a nice accent to the image. Okay, let's see. We have one here. I missed the name on this. Okay, I like these flowers. So let's do a basic preset. We should get a little bit of correction. And let's crop in and get rid of all the other stuff because the whole image is pretty much just repeating patterns of these flowers and the train. So I don't really need all of that. But let's just do a little rule of thirds, put Mickey there on the left. And yeah, black and white sucks. So why don't we let's use a linear or a control line on the silver, tighten up the chroma, and just bring out the details of that train, push the speculars a bit, and then we'll do the same thing, or not the same thing, but kind of the opposite on the bottom. So what I'm going to do here is if I tighten up the chroma, so I don't want to affect the greens. There we go. I'm just going to pull the blacks in. Let the shadows. Okay. And then we'll do some control points. Let's just tighten up the luma and chroma a tiny bit and saturate those. Okay, good. The red's already pretty well saturated. Let me look at this one control line and then I think we'll call it. Let's push the highlights how I did. Let's push the midtones a bit, pull the blacks. Okay, I think I'll call it there. Uh, so we'll do a quick export and compare it here, reset. All right, so here's the original on the right. And if there was a lot of interesting different graffiti on this train or more interesting, it's pretty much dead here on the left side and sky is empty. So I didn't see any reason to keep anything over here on the right side. And then I just amped up the color and contrast. So there's the before and there's the after. And again, this is following my style of photo editing and taking pictures in general, is filling the frame with the subject. Okay, let's see. Let's do this one. All right, we have a nice landscape. We have some lines here. Leading, oh, I've seen this field before, but now it's like filled in. Last time I saw this field, it was dead, right? It was like winter time. So this is kind of cool. Question is, can I do anything with this? Where does this go to? Not re not really anywhere. So what I'm gonna do is let's apply basic preset, and we have some great clouds here to mess with. Uh, let's do let's do a crop, but let's try super wide here, 16 by let's try 16 by 7 and center the tree. And let's fill the field in the bottom 2/3. I think we can go even wider. 65 by 24. Okay. All right. Let's do the low-hanging fruit, which would be the sky. We'll do a control line. Just give it some clear view, micro contrast. Let's warm it up just a couple hundred Kelvin. Where are we at? 61. Let's go to 66. How about a little higher? I don't, yeah, that's too much. 66. Okay, and then the foreground, we can use a control line again. Just put the dropper here, a little tighter on the chroma and luma. Let's push that up. And let's see. Do we go softer? No. Grittier? No. Just a tiny bit micro contrast. Let's pull the blacks, push some midtones, the highlights, and give it a little warmth. Let's make it a little greener. So I'm using a little more push on the white balance because I'm trying to be a little creative rather than trying to make it work more naturally. All right, so far, yeah, let's not let's not push the greens too much, but let's definitely put some more highlights in there. Okay. And I'm going to push the reds that are in here along with the tree. So let's get the tree, because I'd like this color here to kind of go along with this tree. Whoops, we need a new control point and tighten up the luma just a bit and give that some brightness. Some brightness. Oops. Let's stretch that out. Okay. And I'm going to amplify the reds a bit. Uh, Maybe it's orange. Yeah. Okay, good. And a little bit of luminosity there. A little more push in the shadows. Let's try a smaller one. Let's make a new control point. The center here is still a bit too dark to get in here tight. All right, good. All right, now I'm gonna add a little patch of sun in the sky. So let's tighten up the Luma mask. And I just want to hit the whites in the sky, just in a few places, mostly on the right side. And we're going to push the white balance a bit warmer. We'll leave the magenta alone. What am I missing here? This is up here, here. Okay. I guess we'll go around. Okay, let's do some contrast on that. Uh, Full of blacks. Hmm, not quite getting the look I want, but I think that'll do. That a little smaller. All right, I'm going to do a quick compare. All right, I'm trying to center the light a bit. So maybe just a little bit of a pull. Oh, did I not create a new? Let me let me make a new control point and just go in here. I just want to add a little vignette up in here. All right, I think I'm done. Let's export this. Alexa, show me the driveway.
Okay.
Sorry, Allie's losing it. I'm expecting a couple deliveries today. That's my neighbor's delivery. Okay. Um, so let's reset that and do a, I don't know, side by side. Yeah. All right. So here's the original, right on the right, and this is my edit on the left. I think this super wide cropping works really well. And I wanted to sort of get the colors of these kind of reds and browns to match the tree, reds and browns here. So we're kind of leading the eye in color and also with these straight lines. And then centering the tree, of course. This line on the left is not helping at all. So, I mean, I could brush that out with a healing brush or something, but I just left it. And then in the sky, it's just all kind of a gray. So I just added a few hits of white balance to make it look like maybe the sun is trying to peek through. I was trying to do it on one side initially, but it didn't quite look right. So I would definitely go back and work on the sky a little more. But if we do more of a split view, that's the original, and that's the edit. And I think that came out pretty good. Okay, let's see. We have another landscape here from John, and let's do a basic preset. And I think this will also benefit from a nice wide crop. Let's try 16 by 7. Keep a little bit of the shoreline there. Needs a little bit of horizon straightening there, maybe. Just a tiny bit. And let's see if I can divide this into layers. We'll keep the sky up here on that third. And then the bottom 2/3 is pretty much the mountain and water. Okay, now this image here, white balance and lighting. The lighting is a little bit off. I may have to work with the lighting globally first, rather than going right in with local adjustments. So this is very rare that I go to the global side first, but the lighting overall is just not working for me. So I'm gonna do some global adjustments first and see if I can just get it to the exposure that I'm think will work best. Okay, that works. All right, now I can go to the local adjustments. And first thing I'm going to do is bring out the texture in the rocks here, but try to leave this background faded or soft. So we're going to use a very tight luma mask and just crank up the clear view. Oops, push the highlights and the midtones a bit. And maybe warm it up just a couple hundred Kelvin, about 500. Okay, and we'll just follow that line with the water. Okay, let's soften up. Uh, well, there's some nice details in here. I'm going to use a different control point, but I'm going to be much more subtle in this mountain range. I'm just going to pull the blacks a little bit. Maybe give it a little bit of a push and vibrancy. Pull the blacks again. I'm just trying to create a little definition. I don't think clear view, very, very minor clear view and micro contrast. Okay. And I think this control point I can use up in this corner too. Yeah, that's not, okay, that works. Okay, the blues here in the sky are a little bit soft because of the haze, but I'm gonna try and bring them out. So I'm gonna use a control line just here. I'm gonna make a tighter luma and chroma mask just to just to grab onto the blue part there and try and saturate that, give it some vibrancy. Okay. Let's um let's use the eyedropper to kind of, ooh, there's a lot of green and yellow up here, not really blue, huh? Let me go back here. What? Yeah, this control line. Let me get this color back here. Let's shift it. Gotta, man, the magentas now. Desaturate that. Ah, I jacked that up pretty bad. I'm gonna reset that. That's just way too much yellow. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do anything with the color. I can't get the color the way I want. So let's go the opposite direction. Let's just give it some clear view. Come down. And then globally, the white balance, I don't know. Maybe I'll just make it a little cooler. Okay, I think that's it. So let me export, whoops. Let me export that. And do this side by side. All right, so compositionally, I think the wide crop works on this one as well. All I really need to do is bring out the texture here on this mountain and a little bit of the textures here in the middle, but I didn't want to lose that softness from the haze. Uh, the most challenging part here for me was the sky. I feel like, I don't know. I wish I could have saturated this a bit more, but I couldn't do it without jacking up the clouds. 'Cause I like this one cloud line here, right? Let me let me just go back real quick. See if I can do local adjustments on that cloud line. So I, initially, Yeah, I don't think I can do it. There's just not enough separation. No, that's not bad. All right, we'll go with that. Let me export this, and then I'm gonna call it right there. Okay. We'll give that just a second here. All right, so just look at this for the composition, and we'll do a split or yeah, split view. But the wide crop I think works well, and then a minor horizon straightening. But I think that looks pretty good versus say the original, which is just a lot of haze. But I think that looks pretty good. I like the wide crop mostly. All right, and then the last one here, a couple of geese. Oh, okay, springtime. Okay, so I think this one will be pretty straightforward. I'll do a basic preset here. I'm just going to come in a little tighter and do a little horizon straightening. Okay, yeah, I like that. And just a couple of touches. There's already really good lighting here. I'm just going to pull the highlights just a tiny bit. I don't really need to do the eyes too much. I'm going to pull the highlights in just a bit and then just add a little brightness to the heads of these goose. Just a little brightness there. And let's see. Let's just saturate the red here a little bit. And I'm going to adjust the water. Just do negative contrast on that. And desaturate a bit because it's a little bit ugly in there. Come down a bit. What if I shift the white balance? Make it a little bluer. Okay. And the geese, let me just make it a little warmer in there because the control line's spilling a little bit of its white balance onto the geese. So I'm just offsetting that a tiny bit. Uh, and then finally the grass. I think I can do another control line. Let's do it kind of very gradual, like this, and just pull the blacks. Maybe get rid of this, that. What happened to something happened here. Let me tighten up the luma. Oh, oh, oh. I tied together the control. Okay, all right. I have to make a separate. I accidentally didn't create a new control point, so I just wanted a little more red out of that. Okay, let me see where I'm at. Okay, one more. This just needs to be a little warmer. Okay, let's export that and reset. Okay, so again, uh, just getting in tight and filling the frame because they're a little bit far away here. And then I was like, the eyes would be too hard to brighten in this kind of scene, so I just brighten the heads here on the geese to make them stand out a little more, and then of course on the parents here, and then a slight shift in white balance for the water just to make it bluer. Yeah, that really wasn't necessary, but I think it helped a little. And if we do just sort of a before and after, so that's the before and that's the after. Not much needed to be done, and a little straightening on the horizon, but I think that looks good. Oh, my delivery might be here. Alexa, show me the front door. Okay. Usually they just ring the bell and go away. Oh, no, he's waiting for me, I think. Oh, no, that's not a delivery. That's just some scammer. I'm gonna let him go. All right, let me go to the chat section and see what you guys are doing, and then we'll call it. Yeah, he's just advertising something. Okay. So John says, I uploaded a photo with this issue. I tried changing background exposure and ended up with a white line along the edge. Yeah, you have to be really careful with haloing, right? When you're making adjustments. Uh, Sometimes I go back with the eraser brush and try to feather things like that, but sometimes it's really hard. Uh, and so I use an Epson printer and non-Epson paper. Okay, so that makes sense, right? So you download the profiles specific to that paper. When we were talking about, you know, calibrating your photo printer and your monitor and all of that. So a lot of times if you buy paper from a third party, if they're a quality paper, they'll provide an ICC profile specifically for your printer and that paper. Okay, and this replica building from the First World War is located in Zonderen, Zonderingen in Belgium and was used to power the fence to prevent smugglers. Oh, okay. That's interesting. I thought that fence did look very deliberate, right? Uh, we're talking about this photo. And I was curious about the wiring, but I don't know. Okay, I get it. That's interesting. Thanks. And John says that's an excavator, Rob. Oh, yeah, that that giant thing, right? That's an excavator. Okay. I'm so bad with my vocabulary sucks. Alexa, stop. Um What Epson printer do you recommend for printing photos? Okay, good question for Walter. And John says, would you square? Okay, we did that. And Paul says, Rob, I bracketed this shot, and this is the one. This is the -1, which protects the highlights in the sky. Okay. I can't remember. I think you're talking about this image here, right? So, did I already delete my edit? Oh, here it is. Okay, very good. Let's see. And Eric is here. Good morning, Rob. I picked up a hardback book, accidentally Wes Anderson. Yeah. His collection of photos that resemble Wes's style. Very cool collection. Yeah, I love Wes Anderson. He has a really, really unique style. Uh, that's something I should talk about in a regular photo stream. But so I also did create an HDR version, which I also edited. I sent the single shot edit for you to compare. Okay, we'll take a look. Um, we just have to go back to here. So this is okay. So this is John's edit. I'm sorry, Paul's edit. So you didn't crop really, right? You kind of kept the whole frame. Looks good. It's a little, the grass is kind of okay. The grass is a little bit mushy to me, but the edit is awesome. Other than the grass, I would have done the grass a little differently, but I love how you brought out the tracks here and the lines leading up to the tree. We had the same idea again, right? Really making sure we could see that clearly. And the color under here, say compared to what? What did I do? Uh, I did a very similar thing. Actually, my grass is not much better. Uh, and gray skies. So you didn't shift the white balance at all up here. Whereas on mine, you can see, I kind of made it look, I don't know, different. Okay, let's see. And Paul says, took this Saturday weekend, and it just so happens I was using the 14.2.5 that we were discussing on Tuesday. Oh, that's cool. Uh, and Rob, I sent two images by accident this week. Ignore my goose shot if you like. Oh, okay. I wasn't even paying attention, but yeah, we got it out of the way. And X Meta's here. Oh my goodness. I haven't seen you in a long time. I saw you in Robin's stream yesterday or day before, but I haven't seen you in my stream in a long time. Welcome back. Good to see you. Let's see. Thought I lost you forever. And the destruction site was huge local shopping building from the 1980s. I was curious if you maybe can pull a bit from the sky as my own export is more to the warmer and darker tones since it was in the sunset. Okay, so let's go back to I'm pretty sure you're talking about this image here. Let's see how far back. So this was kind of my edit, give or take, right? I Yeah, I kind of went on the cool side, right? With the sky. So I was curious if you could maybe pull a bit from the sky. I see. So you want a more of a sunsetty type feel to it, whereas I was kind of going more for a daylight. So I just have to find that control line, right? It's this one. And instead of shifting the white balance cooler, I just shift it warmer. And maybe push magenta a little bit. And instead of being straight, angle it so it's more looks more like side lighting. And we'll tighten up the lumen mask just a bit. And maybe pull the highlights. No, not highlights. Let's try linear. No, we're gonna have to stretch this more. So that would be a little, I would have to spend some time, but that's kind of the direction I think you were talking about. Uh, is going more for a sunsetty type feel. The problem is the shadows aren't very strong here to give me that feel. But let me see what I can do. It's this control line, right? No, it's this one. What if I pull the contrast? No, contrast ain't doing shit. Uh, we'll do that. A little more of a pull. And where's the white balance? Let's pull that back a tiny bit. Maybe do a slight shift on the blues. To magenta. Yeah, I gotta back off. Okay. I think that's a little more like what you were asking me. Uh, and goslings, thank you. Goslings are young geese. Good to know. But yeah, compared to my original edit, this is more like of a daylight scene versus this feels a more sunsetty, right? With this one. So before and after, I think that's what you were going for. Okay, and then if we do a side by side, a little bit strong. I'd have to work on the gradation of that control line a little better, but that's the direction I would go if I wanted more of a sunset scene. And you're watching quietly. Okay, super. Well, just say hello at the beginning if you're there. It's always good to know if you guys are in the stream or not, because that's why I do them. Just kind of hang out and talk to you guys, answer any questions, and uh, help as many people as I can, and learn along the way. I learn a lot too. Like I learned what goslings are today, uh, and a little history about those fences, like to keep smugglers out. It's always fascinating. So there were a couple other shots in here. Let's see, Kenneth Stevenson and John Lloyd. I'm gonna have to do those next week because I'm already 2.5 hours into this one, so I need to kind of go. Getting hungry. Uh, but I think I'm gonna move this over here. But I'll definitely get to your images next week on Friday. So come in for that. I think I got all the questions. Some great discussion today. Let me know in the comments later if you like this format a little better, where I stop every 2 or 3 images and answer questions, or should I just get through all the images and then do questions? The problem is a lot of the questions are related to the editing I'm doing, so I don't know. Let me know if you guys like that format better, or should I just get through the images and then go to the chat later? I don't know. And the other thing, I haven't given you guys my image to edit in a long time, so I might throw that back in. The other thing that I used to do, I did these years ago, these editing streams, but I used to like put a 5-minute timer limit on each one because I would get like 20, 30 images in. And if I spend 5 minutes each, that's still like 2, 3 hours, right? But now I'm only getting like 8 to 10, maybe 12 images in every week. So I don't mind spending a little extra time and explaining everything and then chatting too. So you guys let me know in the chat or in the comments section. But thanks for joining me today. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you guys sending your images in. It's good to see you today, Walter. And I'll be back on Sunday most likely with uh, more jibber jabber. We'll talk about some photography. And oh, good to see you, Jeff and Tim. Thank you. You like the new format? Okay, so yeah, I feel like that's a good workflow. I know some people are here to just see the editing, but I think that the Q&A kind of every 2 or 3 images really adds value to the actually editing workflow that I'm doing. But I'll have to uh, I'll have to sleep on it. So you guys have a great weekend, and I hope to see you guys again soon.